Hi, my name's Lauren Errington. I'm head of department here at MU English, and we're delighted to have with us today our writer-in-residence from the Arts Council, Louise O'Neill, who will be hosting Sophie White. This is Louise's first event on campus. She's with us for the calendar year, working on her project and teaching our creative writing undergraduates. We're delighted to have such an award-winning author with us to kick off our inaugural Arts Council partnership, and hope you enjoy this conversation. Over to you, Louise.
Hey. First, we just want to say that this lighting is terrible and that we look better than this in real life.
Just take our word for it.
I mean, yes. Okay, well, firstly, I'm going to give a little introduction to our esteemed guest today. Yeah, you have to do that thing with your face where, you know, you have to look really natural, and it's like, yes, this isn't awkward at all. Okay, so Sophie White is a best-selling author and podcaster. Her first book, the memoir Recipes for a Nervous Breakdown, was shortlisted for the Irish Book Awards. Her second book and first novel, Filter This, was also shortlisted for the Irish Book Awards. Her third book, Corpsing, My Body and Other Horror Stories, has been hailed as painful, powerful, visceral and spiritual by Marian Keyes. She also hosts, or co-hosts, should I say, the popular paranormal podcast, The Creep Dive. She has been a columnist for the Sunday Independent for 9 years, currently writing her weekly Nobody Tells You column for Their Life magazine. She has been nominated 3 times for Journalist of the Year at the Irish Magazine Awards. Very impressive, Sophie.
3 times nominee.
More than me. And her latest novel, The Snag List, hold it up there now so they can see it.
I'm so good at pluggery. Yeah. I even brought it.
Her latest novel, The Snag List, will be released on April 21st, very soon, 2022, and is available for pre-order.
No, it really is.
And
please do it.
And tell me about the competition, because I have entered this in the hopes that I will win, but like I don't know if will that be allowed?
I think I've entered. No. It will be allowed.
Okay, good.
There is a brilliant competition actually, because the Snag List is kind of about 3 characters who kind of want to escape their lives, and they've all moved into this kind of like almost like luxury prison style housing estate and called Monterey Valley. And basically the competition that we decided to run was a dinner and night stay for 2 in the Marker in Dublin.
Very fancy.
Yeah, because I thought it was quite good then, because it was kind of like this plays into the kind of escape your life, try and pretend your life's not happening for 24 hours, go to the Marker. So basically if you pre-order the Snag List, I love that we're doing this up top. If you like I'm on the QVC or something, pre-order the Snag List from easons.com and you go into a draw to win an amazing night stay in the Marker 5-star hotel.
What was that? Easons.com?
Easons.com / the Snag List.
Well, you know, I'm going to ask you my first question, which is that very annoying question that people ask women, and particularly mothers.
Am I a natural blonde?
Yeah.
I am.
No, but I suppose my first question is that, like, okay, you write books, you have 2 podcasts, you have a weekly column, you're raising 3 boys, you pole dance, you roller skate, you craft, you cook, and you send multiple extremely long voice messages. And I know this because the day you sent me a 26-minute voice message, I was like, that is the longest voice message I have ever received. So that very annoying question, like, how do you just not sleep? Like, tell me, like, what does your daily routine look like?
My daily routine, that is so funny. I'm addicted to reading people's daily routines online. Like, and I'll take anyone's. Like, I don't even want like Elon Musk's daily routine. I literally want like Sive from, you know, Letterkenny's daily routine. Like, what's Sive
from John Big?
Yeah, I want Sive.
The child bride. What is she doing?
What's she doing in a day? What's my routine? Like, I suppose I do sleep a lot. Noted sleeper. I sleep very well, actually, very heavily, because I put secret earplugs in so that it can drown out the sounds of my children when they need me in the night. I'm joking,
Perfect.
Only slightly. No, it's just the same as everyone else, really. It's just a job. It's, you know, I do think sometimes like people are like, oh, you're really busy, and I'm like, but like I just work Monday to Friday, you know, the same as anyone else. You know, I don't think I'm a very hard worker. I think I'm actually working really hard at giving the impression.
No, there's a lot going on there now. Come on, you have like multiple jobs, and do you find like that you're like, do you find that it's a good distraction to kind of go from one to the other, or?
Yeah, I do enjoy that. Like, I like that the things I do are all, they do feed into each other, in that I think everything, they all have in common that they're kind of storytelling in any kind of whatever guise, like in the podcast, I'm researching and storytelling, same in the books. And so they feed into each other so much. Like the ideas for my first couple of novels that were about an influencer who faked a pregnancy to get big on Instagram was all like, you know, from researching the creep dive and researching all the crazy hoaxes and, you know, grifting that people do on social media. So it all kind of feeds into itself. And then I suppose I have a very busy mind. And I would say that to date, my biggest problem is just trying to get myself to slow down a bit in my head. And that's where roller skating and pole dancing come in, because I think they help me to be more present and calm down a bit. Do you know that kind of way?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I suppose I'd like to take a bit of a break.
I think we all feel
would.
that, yeah. After the pandemic, we're all like, can it just stop for a while?
No, but I do feel really lucky, because I think, like, I'm sure you have this too, like, I tried to work very hard to get to have the opportunity to write books and do the job I do. And like, I try especially to remember just, I suppose, like the years of rejection that, you know, are kind of en route to any type of creative work. And there still is a lot of rejection, you know, and I'm no better at dealing with it at all, unfortunately. But like, I do kind of, I suppose, if you have that behind you, it does make you appreciate that I get to do this, and I'm very excited and happy that I do. But like any job, really bad days. Yeah. Then on those days I send 26 voices to my pals who understand, you know.
Actually, that ties in quite nicely with what I wanted to ask you next, which is you studied at NCAD. So was the original plan, like, did you want to, like, what was your speciality? Like, what did you?
I specialized in sculpture in
Okay.
NCAD, and I did performance art, but it was not really performance art in kind of, I suppose, type of performance art was that I used to make sculptures that people would often wear, like you'd kind of perform the sculptures, kind of like I'd make big pieces that, like for my grad show, I made a kind of big, it looked like a gramophone horn, and the structure was made out of steel, and then it was kind of, I had some fabric around it so that it looked exactly like a big gramophone horn on its side, but it was actually a dress. And a woman wore it to kind of activate the piece. And she was suspended from the ceiling so that she was lying backwards, kind of almost upside down a bit, with her legs in the gramophone horn.
Oh, okay.
And so she was then kind of stitched into it. Like there was a dress top. Do you know what I mean? It was basically a giant dress. It was on its side, and it rendered the woman wearing it completely powerless and to be observed. And so those kind of sculptures required performing in a way, you know, that kind of way.
And was that like, did you want, like when you, when you ask any 18-year-old, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? It's a bit like, I have no idea, but like, was the goal to
be an artist?
Yes, like to create sculpture. Yeah.
If you'd asked me when I was 6, I would have said I want to be an artist.
Oh, really?
I was an obnoxious child, continued to be an obnoxious adult. I had always wanted to do art since I was tiny.
Yeah.
And like, I suppose I was lucky that I knew what that would even be or what that was. But like, there wasn't any artists in my family or anything like that. But like, I suppose my mum, you know, she was a broadcaster at the time. She made kind of factual programming and would have interviewed like so many fascinating people in her career. And I suppose maybe through that I kind of knew what art was, you know, and I was totally obsessed with it. And all the way through school, it was my absolute passion. I didn't do anything else really at all. Like,
and when did that shift into you deciding They become a writer.
Internet.
Yeah. Tell us, what was the moment?
The moment
to give up on your dreams.
So the moment was the 3rd of September 2007.
Okay, are you serious?
I am serious.
Wow, okay.
I
was not expecting. Oh, okay,
yes. It wasn't like a drug enlightenment moment. It was a sorry, I'm just laughing because I just saw somebody saying 26-minute voice message equals podcast.
I know, and I'm obviously not the only person she's sending these to. So like you are like that's like free content. You should
free
be giving that
content.
away.
This chat bar is just rife for trolling me, guys. Please don't. So anyway, yeah, I took a pill at a electric picnic and I had a really bad drug trip, and it basically just like kicked off like a nervous breakdown basically. And I had a nervous breakdown that was very kind of hallucinatory, a lot of auditory hallucinations and visual disturbances, and I was really like consumed by this terror that like nothing was real and that I wasn't real, that my life hadn't been real. It sounds terrifying. It was terrifying. I was 22 and I basically like I kind of went into kind of psychiatric care after a while of trying to kind of pretend everything was fine, trying to manage myself, but like it was I was in bits, and after that, it just sent me off in like a completely different direction in terms of my whole life. Like if that hadn't happened, I actually would, I think, be quite confident in saying I probably might be an artist, or at least might be trying to be, because I loved art. And like I finished out college really strong and thought, oh, I really hoped I'll get into a master's program, go to London, and all that. And that really just was wiped out by the breakdown. And like it's really funny because I suppose when you get ill, like any type of illness, your expectations just completely shift, and you don't even want good things for yourself anymore. You just want not terrible things. So like I just wanted to be okay. I no longer wanted to even pursue this thing that had been such a huge part of my life. Like I can't overstate like actually how art had just been everything. Like I loved reading for sure when I was growing up and stuff, but like it's such a big part of your identity. I think like anyone who is creative, and so it was very weird. It was like being wiped out as a person, and then kind of after eventually the real full-on symptoms of breakdown, I think I was kind of eventually diagnosed with drug-induced psychosis. And a big part of it all was being afraid that I had gone mad and that I'd broken my brain forever. And the kind of reverberations of that, like, to be honest, they've never ended, but I'm so much more like, I'm well put together now in the main. I obviously take my medication. I now have been diagnosed with being bipolar, which, I suppose kind of so much easier when it has a name, so yeah, like after college basically I just became a chef for my 20s, and
then you had a column with when did the one with the symbol
I started that in 2012. So I'd been working as a chef for about 6 years, and that's when I started. Well, I kind of wrote a little bit in that time, but not really. I didn't have a lot of confidence. And I suppose that's the thing as well that illness does to you, is just that you just feel like a non-person. Like it felt very kind of like I felt a bit blank, and I didn't know how to fill in all the blankness anymore, because any of the old ways and the old me just was out of reach kind of. So what's the question? When did the white
turn away
from
that?
When
did the urge that you were like, actually maybe a book could be, was it after the column that you, I know that was a cooking column, but obviously.
Yeah, I was writing a cooking column, and I felt really lucky because obviously I had this kind of opportunity, and because I was writing this cooking column, a publisher asked me if I'd be interested in doing a book, and then the recipes for nervous breakdown kind of came out of those chats. And the thing was, I didn't really want to write a cookbook. I think like I wanted to write, and this chefing was my way in. And I said, oh, like I do have, I suppose, a story, like maybe. And it's about this breakdown. And I felt at the time that there hadn't been a lot of discussion about kind of like drugs and mental health,
Yes.
and kind of how, you know, it can feed into these experiences. I just felt like when I had my breakdown, it was 2007, and there was just like so little conversation in the main about those kind of things. Even the internet was younger, and it was harder to find people who had the experiences you had. And like I always remember finding the work of this academic who had schizophrenia. And I found her to be such a comfort because obviously she was like incredibly intelligent person. She had an illness that is so stigmatized, like it's still so stigmatized of all of them, you know, and obviously was just functioning at such a high level and producing incredible work and research, you know, while also still kind of reporting on how her life is, which is still frequent kind of periods of mental ill health and stuff, which is very relatable to me because I'm the same. Like I have, you know, the kind of mania aspects of bipolar and, you know, the things around that, like that still come up like with frequency. You know, that kind of way. I always think about those towns that have the signs outside that are like days since the last road accident, and I'm like days since the last kind of breakdown or whatever. I'm on a good streak. I'm cruising for a breakdown now because I haven't had one since 2020. But yeah, we'll see.
I remember, like, I read your column, your cooking column in the Sunday Independent. But I mean, for years before, like, you know, I even knew you were really, or had met you, you know, because I was very jealous of, because he used to reference himself in the column, and I was like, oh God, I wish I was like married to someone who was like a really good cook, because your recipes were always delicious. And then I remember when Recipes for a Nervous Breakdown came out of it, and you wrote this, I suppose it was they did an extract, I think, in the Sunday Independent where you talked about having taken this pill and that, you know, you'd had a breakdown. I thought it was extraordinarily brave, because I knew of someone else who, I won't say, but anyway, has sort of made a career out of having had a breakdown, and I think didn't actually publicly disclose that it was because of drugs. Because I think they felt like there was such a stigma around that. And I think that was the moment where I really started to look at you and think she's probably one of the bravest, really writers on the Irish scene. And I think, like, I suppose, you know, and I know then, like, I suppose that carried over into Corpsing, which is your collection of essays with Tram Press that came out last year. And, you know, in that, like, you know, you dealt with your father's early onset dementia and his death, and eating disorders, and I suppose and motherhood and alcoholism and addiction and all, like, which is so.
It had it all.
It really did.
Short of dismemberment.
That
it had it all.
It was when I read the bit about the pigs that I was like, wow, God, okay, we're going here. We're going here. I mean, it was probably in my like top 3 books last year. And I'm not just saying, you knew I was obsessed with it, and I determined to make you my best friend after
but now you are punished with the voices.
I love them.
I loved writing Corpsing. I did think after Recipes for Nervous Breakdown came out, I will never write non-fiction again at all. I was like, it's the end of that. Especially because I suppose things with Recipes for Nervous Breakdown, it didn't go the way I'd hoped it would go as a book. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's a beautiful book. I bought it recently.
Thank you.
Really gorgeous.
It's funny how people still seem to be coming to it. And obviously it's nearly 6 years later. But I think what disappointed me about it was that people didn't actually really want to talk to me about the drugs thing. And I found that just time and again, anyone who did want to talk to me about the book for sort of like, you know, radio or newspapers or anything, they really like focused on this one tiny aspect of the book, which is my dad's early onset Alzheimer's, which he was alive when I'd written that book, and when it came out, he was still alive. But he was like far gone. Like, you know, he wouldn't have even probably spoken to us for quite a while by the time. I wouldn't have even heard his voice, for example. And I wrote this one chapter in Recipes for Nervous Breakdown. It was about that, but I would have said it was such a small part of a story. And yeah, it was all that people really focused on, and it was great to discuss you know, what it's like to have a loved one with an illness like that, for sure. But I also was like, it's amazing, no one's even paying attention to like all the stuff about all the drugs and you know, that kind of way. So it's kind of funny. And then I felt like with corpsing, I was much more engaged generally as like a writer. Like you know, even with Rest Between Ours Breakdown, when that came out, my publisher was like, you should join social media. And I was like, okay. Because I'd managed to have this really off-grid 20s where I lived in like a van for a lot of it, didn't have internet for a lot of it, didn't know what the Daily Mail sidebar was. I mean, a sad existence.
No, I'm sorry, that is the dream. The dream.
It was a very nice period. And then it was, I came back and my publisher was like, you know, you should join social media, just pick one, pick Facebook, pick whichever. And I was like, okay, I'll pick Instagram. And I had like 30 followers when my book came out. And I remember, like, if you go way back to the start of my Instagram, it's like me and my book and be like, hey everyone, everyone. And so I just wasn't very engaged. Whereas when Corpsing came out, it was like, I just had this opportunity, this great kind of space on the internet, on Instagram, for people to chat to me about the book, for people to tell me what they thought of it. For people to tell me that it helped or that they got something out of it, and it was really gratifying. And also, I suppose, with your first book, it's such a, you don't know, like, I still don't know what I'm doing or anything like that, but at the same time, I'm kind of used to coming to each new book not knowing what I'm doing. But with Corpsing, I wrote it over a long period of time. It was just something that was able to shape shift as I worked on it, which was just very different. It's been very different to my other books. And so I really enjoyed the writing of it. And it's funny now, like, I finished Corpsing, I was like, that's it, I'm done with nonfiction, absolutely done with nonfiction, never going to do nonfiction again. And then I was like, what about though? And I was like, shut up in there, for God's sake.
Someone just said there, you know, great to hear someone talking about this. Sophie's honesty is so refreshing and welcoming. And like, I do think that's so true. But I am curious about, like, when you're writing nonfiction, I suppose I would always be worried about, let's say, like, do you have to ask family members? Like, I know obviously
I'm
it's
lucky,
you,
I barely any.
Yeah, I know you've no brothers and sisters. Do you have a brother or sister dead? Because they'd say not a hope or you're allowed, you know.
Yeah, I know. Like, I think the family thing's funny. I think I'm just blessed with these two people who are really disinterested. Seb, my husband, and mother. Not that they're, like, she's not disinterested, but she is actually a very unusual person who genuinely seems to have mastered the art of genuinely not caring about other people.
So she is. She had a column, didn't she? No, she didn't. Oh, sorry.
She's not like. Yeah, I think she's just. I think she tells herself as well, though, that I've created this character of my mother. And she thinks it's got nothing to do with her. And I'm like, no, it's actually a really faithful portrait of who you are. Everyone says it. But yeah, no, she's very tolerant. She's actually just very tolerant, very generous. I think that's the thing. When you're writing a nonfiction, the people in your life, like, they're either, they hate it, or they're very, very generous, and they just think they can just be a bit live and let live about it. I always find it really interesting because, like, David Starr is like such a fave of mine, and I love his work, and like his family get absolutely annihilated in his work. And it's very interesting because you have absolutely, through all his books that are all nonfiction, they're kind of like, he's kind of a humorist, isn't he? And like, you've seen through his writing the reactions of his family and things like that, and you can tell. And one of his sisters died by suicide. I'm now saying that, and I'm like, am I rolling the dice? Was it definitely that? But it was that. And I think he wrote his last book, Calypso. I think it's one of his most incredible books. It's really it's full of like humility and self-reflection. He's obviously a lot older, and it's definitely, it's so interesting, I think, to read him and to kind of read a person who's at this kind of like, you know, he's older and he's lived his whole life of kind of like almost performance of himself through his books and the people in his life and stuff like that. And I do think it's a lot to make your whole career that. Like, he's incredibly good at it. I would never choose it. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the thing with nonfiction, is that people do sometimes think of it as like a photograph of a life. but I definitely think of it more as like, you know, a painting where it's, you know, very kind of molded like by what I'm choosing to reveal and disclose, and you know, that kind of way. It's an impression, I guess, of a life, not a representation.
That's a really great way of putting it.
Yeah. My mother's like, still doesn't make up for the fact that page 237.
She does not read it. I think she'd probably be safer. Actually,
they don't read them before published, I will say that.
Really?
They are. They live dangerously, don't they?
That's the only time to read it if you're going to have questions or you're going to have notes.
I know, I've always been
what can you do once it's published?
Exactly, I'm always like, here's your moment.
Yeah.
Anything you want changed, you know?
But it's funny, I suppose, that you bring up your mother, because I was thinking about this, like motherhood is like, is this thing, you're really nervous.
I'm like, are you like talk about my next book?
Yeah, well, we don't have to, but
I'm dreading telling my mother about it.
Well, I mean, I suppose motherhood is sort of a theme. I mean, obviously in corpsing, like, you know, there's drunk mother, where you talk about, you know, that incredible image of like, you know, that alcoholism is sort of like this poisonous baby that like is attached to you, you know. And then I think it's really visceral, like the descriptions of just breastfeeding, and like, you know, like it's such a physical representation of motherhood. And then, you know, obviously with Mother podcast that you have, like, I feel like that's also kind of breaking down, I don't know, the secrecy, or like I'm not a mother, so I have no idea, but I feel like so often, like I know with friends of mine, as soon as they say something negative, they're like, but I love my children. I know you don't have to tell me every time that you're giving out that they haven't slept or whatever, that you love them, you know?
Yeah.
And I won't, I mean, Where I End, which is your new book, well, the new book is the Snag List, but like the book after that. Also, you know, that's a really big, I won't go into it. Let's just say when I read it, I messaged Sophie and I was like, there's something wrong with you. Like, I love this book. I mean, it's phenomenal, but like, I was like, you are unhinged.
Unhinged.
It's a horror movie set on an island, but again, we won't give too much. But, you know, and I suppose even with your columns, like I remember after the Deirdre Morley case, which, you know, the mother who, you know, killed her 3 children, and you wrote this, I mean, just this stunning piece that like was just so, I don't know, just was so compassionate and so honest and so vulnerable, and I felt really like spoke to that moment in a way. And so I suppose, is that very deliberate? Like, are you making a choice to be like, I want to break kind of, I don't know, as I said, break down that silence, or sort of, I don't know, be as, I mean, you're so honest anyway, maybe you just can't help it.
I don't know how to be any different, I think. I think with like Deirdre Morley, with that saw what I felt was kind of a level of understanding kind of being grudgingly offered by the kind of mainstream conversation around it, kind of people like, you know, saying yes, she was sick, but like I felt still that there was a lot of like people just being quite hands-off about it, and therefore kind of just it robbing her of her humanity and her tragedy was how I felt it was being discussed. And, you know, I don't know, like I just felt like saying something about it, I guess, because when I remember, obviously we all remember when it happened, and then when I wrote that piece, it was going through the courts, and I just keenly felt that I just felt very close to her.
Yeah.
And not just because we have the same illness, just generally felt that the kind of, the sanitization of motherhood has just served no one. Like, it's just really a disservice to women. I just feel like over and over again, like women are just kind of weirdly punished for just like being anything less than like grateful 100% of the time. And I just feel like it's weird to have put motherhood up on this pedestal. Like, you're literally just making new people. We're here, generally species do that, and it seems so praised that we've taken this concept of motherhood and like just elevated it to this crazy thing that like nobody can pull off. And especially we can't pull it off in the world as it is right now. Like, it's funny, I just wrote this piece because the Snag List is so much about regrets.
Yeah.
And this is a book that I wanted to kind of, in this book, kind of answer that question of like, can you ever be free from regrets? And I think that for women, a big part of like, you know, life, if you kind of do those types of kind of, oh, I'm having kids now, oh, I'm getting a mortgage, oh, I'm doing this, they're all great opportunities, but they're opportunities that ultimately shut down other possibilities. And it's kind of, you know, hard to be open about saying, I have kids and I do love that, but like, you know, I now can't, you know, I have to make all of my decisions, you know, like that. I'm like, look, that's grand. It's not a complaint as such, but I do think it's unfair that like if women are so penalized for saying anything like that. And so I was only just writing an essay about regret, kind of like about the Snag List, and saying that thing of like, it's to say I regret having children, it's just such an unsayable thing. It's literally probably the most taboo thing you can say. Like Rachel Cusk wrote an amazing book in the early 2000s. The name has just gone out of my head. That's really killing me. Someone in the chat, Google Rachel Cusk's motherhood book, 2003. We need this. But basically, like Rachel Cusk's a novelist, and her whole career was like really kicked off the road because of this one book where she was fabulously honest. Yeah. And funny enough, Anne Enright, A Life's Work, thank you, Carl. Anne Enright, who is obviously a national treasure, Anne Enright, also wrote a wonderful book stating some degree of ambivalence about motherhood called Making Babies, and it's a brilliant book as well. She wrote it in the 90s, I think it was, and it was definitely like, I think, a brave piece to bring out back then. And like, it's basically just such the unsayable thing. And, you know, with Snag List and stuff, I wanted to kind of say, like, I think it's really fair to say I regret having children in the system that we're living in now that has actually, it makes it like punishingly hard to have a family, provide for that family, and then provide emotionally for your children and feel fulfilled. It's honestly a laugh that they think it's working, you know. I think the pandemic really like exposed that in such a big way. And obviously I was writing the Snag List through the pandemic. Everyone now of our ilk will have that book they wrote during the pandemic, and like, I don't know what happened. But like, it's not as depressing as I'm making it sound. But like, there's a family in the Snag List where the family business is a YouTube channel, and the kid is the star of their YouTube channel. He's 11, and they started the channel when he was 6. And I just found it such an interesting kind of, I suppose, like, irony that this family, like the mother obviously feels very uneasy about how they make their money, because it is their entire revenue stream is this kid playing with toys for the internet. And she, I know his name's Max. The channel's called Max Day. Dad's American. That's why like somebody's like, how will this be believable? And I'm like, the dad's American. Yeah. But the thing is that they constantly justify it to themselves by being like, well, we're actually getting to spend more time with our kid than people who are in a 9-to-5. And I enjoyed that irony, because obviously so much judgment about how parents parent and how internet parents do it and things like that. So I thought it was kind of a fun one to play with as an idea, that like, you know, you'd be making your child your colleague, absolutely commodifying his childhood just to get the old quality time in, you know, that kind of way. So yeah,
always producing,
always mining everything for content. I made this kid and now I'm gonna make him a star.
And I mean, it's just like that ambivalence. I mean, obviously with Ro, which is another, because there's 3 characters, it's Lindy, Ro and Alva, and Alva has just had a baby and is sort of an unlikely mother, and then Ro is sort of trying for a baby but doesn't really want one because she has all of her own ambitions, and you know, is afraid that a baby will kind of
she's kind of on the cusp. She's like teetering, and she has just met Lindy and Alva, who are like playing out very viscerally in real time exactly what having this baby might do to Alva's own, to Ro's own ambitions.
We're going to come back to that, because I just wanted to ask one question. It's funny because people always say to me, "Oh, your books are really different," but I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like the tone of my books are pretty much the same. Whereas like your books,
I think that
okay, well, yeah, this isn't a big but like, I suppose, you write both commercial women's fiction and literary fiction. And obviously non-fiction as well.
Well,
So like
literary fiction as of soon.
yeah.
And whether or not people consider horror to be literary
it's
fiction,
literary.
we'll
It's
see.
literary. The writing is
Literary horror,
is
maybe.
very
Yeah.
and obviously, like with the Filter This trilogy, which as you said was about sort of the social media influencer, like I suppose I'm just really intrigued by
Flitting around.
yeah, and like which do you find more comfortable, or which do you enjoy more, or does it sort of give you a break to go from one to the other? And obviously, I said the Snag List, which is coming out next month, which is just
more like
so funny,
commercial fiction.
like
Yeah,
so funny. Like I just laugh out loud. Yes, I was wondering about that kind of going between the two. This was very indicative of you as a person as well.
Just flitting around.
No, but like you have that darkness, but also like this like great capacity for humor and for love and for joy, and
Thank you. Yeah. Dark at my core.
Yeah, all the best people are.
I like moving between things. I just guess I find it. I think generally a story will present, and the story will dictate the genre and the voice of it. Do you know that kind of way? I do think that, like with corpsing, I think I sometimes had to try and make myself not just kind of do the sort of easy, try to be kind of like trying to be funny about everything, and like to instead sometimes actually sit with something and like just be a bit kind of braver and not just kind of like dash it off as a joke, you know, that kind of way. I think the stories usually come first, and then I would kind of tend to, decide where they might lie in terms of the tone and things. And obviously, I just think the things I like generally are usually a collision of kind of tone and even genre and stuff like that. I just enjoy. I mean, the unexpected, I guess, but like, even like, say, I just finished reading Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, and it's so brilliant, and it's like truly tragic, and yet the funniest book I've read in a long time. And I think that like those kind of things, I suppose, it's just, I do find the work generally feels the same. I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, corpsing must really taken it out of you to write. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. But like, I would have said it felt the same nearly, as any other.
And when you're, sorry not to cut across you, but like, because obviously the Snag List is coming out now next month, and that's commercial women's fiction, and Corpsing, which was your last book, which is like literary nonfiction. Like, how do you find in the way that those are received is different? Like, do you still think there's a snobbishness around commercial women's fiction, or has that kind of dissipated?
I think that it's really dissipated because I don't speak to men.
Yeah. Unless they're harassing you on your roller skating.
Oh my God, I got so much chat back from men last Saturday because I was roller skating on my own. I do think that it's really dissipated, because I think now like people like Marian Keyes obviously have done so much in terms of just like, I suppose just showcasing like what amazing ideas can be explored in such an accessible space. Yeah. And I also think one of the things I think like changed reading in books so dramatically has been like Bookstagram and BookTube. So like the readers of Instagram and YouTube, and like I find it very inspiring space to occupy as a writer. Now obviously I leave it anytime there's like a new book coming out of mine or something, but I love to read the reviews of readers who do like, they have like dedicated accounts and things like that. I just find that you just get such a sense of what people are enjoying and why they're enjoying it. And I think it's just like one of the biggest helps as a writer is to get that information, to get that feedback and see what speaks to people. And I think those and they're largely women, those women writing in that space, it's just really nice, I think, actually to see. I think what it is it's a whole person's reading appetite showcased. And you can see the breadth of their interests and the willingness to read in every genre, you know, that kind of way. And I think that like, you must have felt that yourself, going from like really like, you know, really intelligent, you know, gutsy YA into adult like literary fiction. You know, people, I find now, readers don't distinguish, you know, and I think that's so great. And I think that that's possibly because of the kind of the gatekeeping's been removed of the kind of the books page or the book supplement. That's, you know, and now instead what we have is just like very, very smart, engaged, you know, lovers of books, and being like, yeah, I just read, you know, popping into my head, I'm just like miserable book, a little, just read a little life, and now I'm going to read, or like say My Dark Vanessa. I remember seeing a lot of people being like loving My Dark Vanessa, and then like the next week a lot of people being like, I'm taking a breather and I'm just going to like enjoy the new Maureen McFarlane or whatever. And it was so exactly, a little basil sorbet.
Yeah, exactly.
Not unlike the Snag List.
I was just going to say, because it's funny that you say that though, because I'm obviously teaching a class here on campus. Like one of the big things I keep saying to the students is like, just the more well-read you are, and sort of the wider, like, you know, if you read in every genre, you know, I think the better writer you will be in sort of breaking down that snobbishness around genre.
And I think as well, like receiving permission. That's the one thing I always feel, especially from reading Marian Keyes actually in a big way, is like this sense that you almost need to, and I got this from Emily Pine massively too, when A Note to Self came out, was like almost like you're reading somebody doing this thing, and you kind of, it unlocks something yourself as a writer, being kind of like, oh, I can do that, or I can do something like that, or I can do something in this way, do you know, that kind of way. I think that's really, really important, you know. And I think as well, like some of the kind of people we think of as like kind of literary giants, like, are so much more accessible than you even think they are in a way. Like I had, you know, I do chats sometimes on Instagram, and like I was doing a kind of a book, recommending books by genre. So people were asking for, they'd say the genre, and I'd be like, oh, this is what I love in this genre or whatever. And somebody was like asking me about a book to break a reading drought. And I think that's something that people came up against all the time in pandemic, was the sudden shutdown of like, I can't focus enough to read a book. And I think people were getting quite depressed by it. And I definitely was getting it. And I think it's very natural. I think we were all like in a state of such ambient anxiety that like we almost couldn't even assess that we were anxious, but we knew we couldn't read a book. And then the book I recommended was like Any Sally Rooney, because I was like, she actually is so accessible. Like it's beautiful writing and smart ideas, and it's very accessible. So
it's funny, I said that to a student last week. I was like, good writing can be very simple. Do you know, that way it doesn't have to be sort of boring. Actually, you know what though, speaking of or like kind of that, because I know loads of people who were really struggling to read during the pandemic, I do think the Snag List would be a great one to break that, because it's just so funny. Like it's actually, do you know what, because we've sort of been talking around it, so now I'm going to ask you to give sort of the elevator pitch. Give us the synopsis there for the Snag List.
The synopsis is, okay, so it's kind of interested in the idea that like, I kind of was wondering, you know, regret's quite a privileged thing really, because it's suggesting that you've got a whole lot of things taken care of, so now you have space to ruminate. And it's actually quite an obnoxious activity, but at the same time, it's very human. And so, and I'm always very interested, I think that's the one thing my fiction tends to have in common, is that I'm very interested in kind of how we live now and where it's going. And, you know, I think with sort of Filter This and Unfiltered, it was obviously all about that kind of like, you know, how we're doing a sort of a pantomime online of our lives, and it's all very performative. And then I think with this one, you know, I was kind of interested in how, you know, we are just all so focused on kind of optimizing our lives. Like I'm fascinated by the way everyone's obsessed with studies about like, you know, how like, you know, what's going to make you die? Oh, doing this activity, you know, it increases like, you know what I mean? Like it's bad for your health, and like it affects your mortality rate. And I'm like, the mortality rate's 100%, guys. Like, why are we even concerning ourselves with this? So I guess it was, it's kind of an examination, I suppose, of like being very privileged, as so many of us are, and we're lucky, and kind of like when everything's taken care of, what's left, I guess. And so like the characters in this book moved to
Lindy Rowe
and Alba. I'm so bad at these lift pitches. I'm just gonna get out this window. Yeah, I can't just slink out here. Yeah, they moved to this kind of very luxurious, hyper-polished housing estate where everything's done for you. So basically, literally down to the fact, like, if you have a hangover, you can call someone, they come to your house and they hold your hand and tell you that your friends don't hate you. Like, it is literally the dream. So everything is taken care of, and yet still these three women just have these like niggling dissatisfactions with how they're living their lives. And, I suppose just kind of, I think that thing of like, is it ever too late as well to go after what you want? And I suppose as well, like in previous generations, there was much more of a prescribed way of living. And now we have that so much less. And we have things like, people coming into their own, like so much later, like whether that's people coming out and kind of like asserting an identity that they've been denying themselves or felt pressured to, later in life, or like in the case of Rowe, she has always wanted to be on the stage, and she has been such a kind of a chronic people pleaser all her life that she just, there's a lot to her, but like there's a lot of reasons why she basically felt she couldn't, and it's her friend now gives her the push to kind of do it. And like, I suppose the way the world is now, it's such a small world with the kind of connectivity that like, Rowe could actually become a star, even though in musical theatre years, she's actually about 90, she's 33. But
it's like in Bridgerton when they're like 26, a
spinster left on the shelf. But yes, that's the worst elevator pitch of all time. Yeah.
No, but it's like,
reach the back.
These three women, so it's Lindy, who has,
helping me.
No, you're fine. She and her husband, and have sort of monetized their son's love of gaming, and they have this YouTube channel, and then Alba has married this sort of tech giant, and they've had a baby, but she's hiding this secret.
Yeah.
And then Rowe is in this really loving relationship, and he's very anxious to have a baby, and her ambitions to be on the stage are sort of, I suppose, taking precedence over that, and she's too afraid to have like a proper conversation. And then they all move into this incredible luxury estate, and it's like kind of just all
it all collides,
as it's bound to, but it's just so funny and like such a clever satire and just such an enjoyable read. It's brilliant, and it's out April now.
Thank you so much.
So we have some questions here. Okay, so the photo, which I thought as well, Sophie, the photo painting distinction was really interesting, Sophie. Where do you think this sudden hunger for creative nonfiction in the published industry is coming from, and where might it be going? I actually am really interested in this as well, because when people talk about creative nonfiction, what does that even mean? So over to you there now.
Oh God, that's a big question. Where do I think the hungers come from? I wouldn't be like, I mean, it might be oversimplifying it, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if there is something in the fact that we all started blogging. And like all of these kind of, I suppose, voices on the internet talking about just living, kind of proliferated, and it, I think, showed that there's an enormous appetite for reading about ourselves and reading about other people. And I would, like, in terms of the actual industry, I wouldn't be surprised if they were seeing that and listening to it a little bit, And definitely, I think as well, like, that was how I think a lot of like women's voices in that space started coming through. Like, people like Lindy West, kind of a good example of that. Just this kind of space for, even people to kind of speak in that kind of more internet speak of like, not having to aim literary necessarily anymore. Like it kind of just, I feel like, democratized it all a bit. Do you know the way? And also like, obviously, like a lot of the literary nonfiction stuff, from where I'm standing, it seems like a lot of it is women. And
I would agree with that,
yeah. And I think that I wonder, is it almost that like, the kind of, white, straight man experience has been the default for so long in fiction. And, the women within that were always outliers, and also, you know, it was always leaving behind swathes of more marginalized identities, like people of color and trans people and queer people and things like that. So I think, you know, it was just that sort of thing that fiction by those writers was always going to be picked up less.
Yeah.
And so then I think, you know, people took it to the internet. It was an amazing new space. And I suppose getting people interested in fiction that centers around lives that people are less connected to, shall we say, purely by dint of it being kind of a minority perspective. I think maybe getting people to kind of get behind fiction about that is a little harder at first, but people coming and saying, like, this is my story, was perhaps the way to break through.
That's really interesting.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
and then I think it's great then, because like we always talk about this with, like, say, trauma and that kind of trauma porn thing, and that thing of like having to, you know, be a person who's already been victimized by kind of mainstream society in whichever way it might be, say as a trans person, and then you nearly have to offer up your traumatic experience to sort of almost justify your presence. And like, that's obviously really wrong. But I do think, like, it's so good now that, like, we're having more kind of like mainstream success of writers like Troy Peters, like Detransition Baby was a book I read just before Christmas and loved. And like, you know, I just hope, like, we're just gonna get more and more and more and more and more of that. But I do think sometimes it's kind of like, is that why we're seeing it? That kind of people are almost like making the first puncture with a kind of very visceral piece of first person kind of nonfiction. And then, you know, hopefully that's just gonna make the whole wider and wider. What do you think?
I mean, I'm not the one being interviewed, so
I know, it's definitely
you're the one who has to have all the opinions here. And I'm also conscious that there might be more. So I really enjoy Sophie's writing and the discussions, creep listening, as it feels like, although we're all on a learning journey trying to do better wherever possible, but that there's a deliberate compassion and consideration of the topic.
I
think two people.
That was just a compliment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Someone said, do you ever have to censor your own writing because you feel it's too honest? I think that's our last one. And then I've got one last question for you, Sophie. I mean, I think you've kind of said that. Sorry, just this one from Kim. Sophie, I just have to tell you that when we were scattering my dad's ashes last year, the thought of your dad's ashes in the Saxa salt container kept coming to my mind, and it brought some much needed levity to the situation. So thank you for that. Thank you for the openness and honesty with which you write. It takes guts.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
And I suppose, do you ever have to censor your own? I think so. I wonder, is that my student? If it is, hi Jordan. Do you ever have to censor your own writing because you feel it's too honest and personal?
I can't think of a time.
I don't think so.
I can't think of a time where I've been like, there's Jordan. Hey Jordan.
Yeah.
I can't think of a time where I've put something on the page and then been like, you know, taking it back out.
Yeah.
I don't know, am I okay?
After reading where I am, no.
Louise is like live texting through reading this manuscript, and it was a terrible first draft. And
I'm sorry.
We were very generous about it.
No.
Stop.
She kept saying it was a terrible first draft, and now I feel so ashamed by my first drafts, which are genuinely terrible.
Stop.
And this was like this immaculate piece of writing. Anyway, it's stunning, and
it's out in Halloween.
Yeah, was not yet the first.
But yeah, no, the one thing I once ever took out and abandoned and totally left on the floor was before corpsing. In the opening of corpsing, I'd had this author's note. I'd written a kind of a letter that was what I in my mind was calling a T's and C's, terms and caveats. And it was basically like a big whole apology for like, I'm sorry I wrote this, and I'm sorry you have to read it, and then I left it in up until the last kind of iteration of the book, the last kind of round of edits, and then I did take it out, and I felt, oh, you know, it weakens it to explain it here. Take that out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, main thing I've ever really taken out and been like, this is unacceptable. And it wasn't overly revealing at all. It was just possibly just weakening the work. I think
that's the best reason to take something out, though.
Yeah.
It's not from fear, but out of an objective sort of analysis of the work and being like, this weakens the work.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's it. And I think as well, like with the people kind of saying, oh, like it's quite honest. You know, you kind of forget how long a writer will sit with a piece of work before it's in the world. And like in the first draft, I always, when I'm chatting to people, like I do a bit of mentoring and I chat to people and I'm like, put everything in, like just absolutely like vomit it up on the page. And you'll fix it all in the next draft. You'll take out what you're not comfortable with, you know. And what happens, I think, is in the first draft, I'm like, well, obviously that will never make it into the final book. Like, I will not be, for example, funny enough, the essay about self-harm was, I think, the biggest one in my mind. That I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't have this out there. And then, you know, just the more you kind of work with it, the more distant it becomes from you as well. I think that's the thing. You actually just start to become, it's more analytical, the work you're doing with it. It's no longer very emotive. It's about the shaping and the working with it and and the painting of it, I guess. So you're not looking at it anymore, you're looking at the painting by the end. You know?
No, and I think you're right with that. It's like anything in the first draft. You know, there is that distance by the end of it. You're coming to it from a much different, I suppose, perspective. Now that I have seen that Jordan is here, and that brings me very nicely to my final.
About your homework.
My final question, which is because, as I said, I am teaching a creative writing module here. So, what is your best piece of advice for aspiring authors?
So my best piece of advice is kind of harks back to that Bookstagram, booktube thing of, okay, so one of the things I think is a really good thing to do is with a book you love, go to Goodreads and not a book you've written.
No, never
go there if you've written the
That
book.
is self-harm.
That's absolutely self-harm. And one I've never engaged with. Very healthy. No, to go to Goodreads with a book you love and see what other people have written about it. And I find that really good as a writer because, like I said, I think it really drills down into what people connect with in a book. And I just feel like it's a great way of just getting to the kind of nuts and bolts of like what works and why. Do you know that kind of way? Like, I think there's loads of advice that's like without saying stuff like just read. But I think that's one that I've come to as a writer, as a working writer myself, is that's one that I find really useful.
And actually, do you know what's funny about that is that it will also, I think, is quite helpful that like when you love a book and you think this is just a work of like a masterpiece, and then you read someone absolutely trash it on Goodreads, and you're like, it's actually kind of helpful because you're like, okay, so there's no such thing as a piece of work, no matter how brilliant that I think it is, that everybody's going to love or everyone's going to understand the intention or everyone's going to enjoy. And actually that is kind of, I think, gives a healthy sense of perspective when it comes to your own work, that you're like, some people will love this, some people will hate it, and that's fine.
It does take a bit of the sting out. Plus, best never to read what people really think of at all, because it can really get in your head and you don't want any like disembodied voice of someone on the internet to start backseat driving your work. The other thing is, I would say, is Google Dan Harmon Story Circle. For anyone who is kind of working in fiction, but I think it works across all. I think it works for nonfiction too. And it's kind of Dan Harmon's a TV writer, but like it's kind of a formula for the perfect story and why a story feels so satisfying. And it's just a very easy one, but I use it for lots of my work. And it's kind of like it's a 3-act structure, basically kind of imagined as a circle. And it's kind of like, you know, like where your character's at the beginning, the usual stuff, the inciting incident, make a plan, you know, blah, 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 and then to the end, what's changed. And if you just look it up, there's, you know, great infographics online about the story circle. And I think that that's a nice way to think in terms of the work you're writing on, because I do think I'm very kind of the reader is very with me while I'm writing, like in terms of like trying to entertain, you know. And I do think there's writers that absolutely go to the page and it's them on the page and we get to witness their genius, and that's great. But I definitely feel that I'm quite with a reader. I write with a reader in my mind, as in I will often with a book like this have a person almost that I genuinely think of in my life, and I'm like, Roisin is like, I would love, like, you know, Roisin's who I'm aiming at.
Yeah. And actually, when you said that, you know, about like thinking of the reader and wanting to create something that's enjoyable, like I think you've really succeeded with the Snag List, because
And I teased that up.
Yeah, you did, and I'm just like
into the bathroom. I know nothing about sports.
So clearly,
I was like, it's a home run, but I'm doing a slam dunk.
Okay, so Sophie White, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here today. And as we said, the Snag List is coming out April 26th.
First, I believe.
Is it first?
21st.
21st, and it is available for pre-order now. And if you do it on eastons.com, you could be in for an opportunity to win a nice day from marker.
Yeah.
So thank you so much,
Thank
Sophie.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
to the
Sandra.
English
Thank
department.
you. Yeah. So just nodding along here in the background. So
I know, I feel like it looks like we are ignoring.
Yeah.
I was like, we were told. It's like,
Just say thanks to all of our audience. And if you would like to listen again, or you have friends you'd like to recommend the chat to, it will be in a little while up on YouTube. So we'll see you there.
my favorite place.
Take care. See you next time. Thanks.